It's time to talk about why Balan Wonderworld is actually good. You might think I'm a little bit late to the party, but that's because I took my time. I didn't just play levels, I replayed them, replayed them, and pushed the costumes and mechanics in all the ways I could think to, so that way you'd get a well-considered and eloquently worded opinion on the subject. In case you're somehow out of the loop, Balan Wonderworld flopped hard. I've never seen a video game so thoroughly thrashed on YouTube, and it's already got a reputation on par with Sonic Boom, Sonic 06, and Mighty No. 9. A reputation wholly undeserved, I would say. In this video we're going to go over Balan Wonderworld, its various systems, mechanics, and intricacies, so I can describe to you exactly why I think it's actually brilliant. Maybe I'll even open your heart to the idea of giving it another shot. But first, what kind of game even is Balan Wonderworld? Well, it's a collect-em-up 3D platformer focused primarily on exploration of small, but densely packed levels. The primary collectible is Balan statues, which you use to unlock new worlds, similar to stars, thunder eggs, golden cubes, jiggies, pages, shine sprites, take your pick. You obtain these Balan statues through clever usage of the game's 80 unlockable costumes. Now, with the basics out of the way, I motion we finally start talking about the game proper.
Hello to the Wonderworld. Say hello to Balan's world.
Balan Wonderworld is a tale of two children, Leo and Emma, who are transported by an enigmatic entertainer, obviously named Balan, to a magical world in the hopes that they'll discover something to heal their broken hearts. Unfortunately, Balan Wonderworld isn't as it should be. Darkness has corrupted the hearts of its many other visitors. Leo and Emma must travel into the hearts and minds of these trapped souls and free them of their sorrow. It won't be easy, as tangible negativity has twisted the landscape and unleashed deadly creatures to impede them. My favorite thing about the story, by far, is learning about each of the trapped souls and seeing them overcome their struggles. After aiding them, they even perform a dance number set to music which illustrates the lesson they've learned. The quality of these 12 struggles is incredibly mixed, but special shoutouts go to Chapter 7 in particular. It's my favorite for its relatability and excellently communicating its ideas. As to the music, there are 3 songs in total spread throughout the dance numbers. The first song is Stronger, which is about how we become better people by conquering adversity. The second song is Hooray, which is about reaching a new understanding about ourselves and the world. And the last song is Together, which is about the importance of working together to overcome challenges too great for only one person. All of these tracks are pretty precious, and Hooray in particular managed to give me goosebumps and make me cry, though the duet version of Together also came pretty close. I wasn't surprised to find out a common complaint from critics is that the story is too difficult to understand overall, but I do find the game gives you everything you really need to know. These 2 kids are hurting, so are these 12 other people, and you have to dispel the darkness inside of them so they can live fulfilling and happy lives. That's good stuff. There's just also a lot more left to interpretation. You'll be hearing my interpretation. Ahem. So, as I understand it, Balan basically runs the Infinity Train. His theater appears when people are at their worst, and they're meant to enter his wonderworld to overcome their internal struggles. In his attempts to aid others, Balan has spent so long focusing on positivity and always smiling that he denied himself the chance to feel negative emotions. He's lonely because the people who leave his wonderworld forget him forever. He's tired because smiling forever drains you. He's angry because his lot in life is horrendously unfair. But he keeps shutting these emotions out until eventually they burst free and are given a life of their own as a villain named Lance. Lance then infects the visitors to Balan's wonderworld with his dread, forcing them to stay forever. That way Balan will never be lonely again. My evidence for this? At the end of the game, you see the teardrops you've been collecting throughout the journey are actually Balan's own tears. And the final dance number, which is called Wonderworld, features an important line about balancing your positivity with your negativity to ensure a healthy life. When Balan removes his hat, he also bears a startling resemblance to Lance. And lastly, but most obviously, Balan and Lance's names are obviously meant to resemble balance when smashed together. I'm not 100% confident that what I've said here is the intended character for Balan, but it's my reasoning behind the events of the game, and again, I think it's pretty good stuff. Graphically, on the other hand, I think Balan Wonderworld is really mixed. Beauty is incredibly subjective, but I do find all the locations and their accompanying music to be as lovely as they are endlessly varied. I also think Balan's character design is wonderfully unique, and I want a plush of him. It isn't as easy to speak kindly for the performance problems, though. The game stutters a lot, most noticeably when enemies are nearby, and it almost constantly has frame rate problems in the larger levels. There are also bizarre issues with the screen being flooded with sudden bursts of errant color, and I'm not even sure what could be causing such a strange issue. I have a very strong suspension of disbelief, so bad performance rarely pulls me out of an experience, but it also absolutely does the game no favors to have such poor production values, especially given it's modeled after theater plays. It's a real shame. The costume system and costume economy make the whole game into a puzzle. Think of it like a little strategy card game. You have a hand of 3 cards, all with their own unique effects. Some of them rarely have multiple. However, them only having one effect doesn't mean they only have one utility. You may want a particular card to solve a particular problem, but with intuition and creative thinking, you can often make do with what you already have. The limitation to 3 cards at a time is quite deliberate because the limitation is what creates the challenge. It encourages you to think strategically about what you have and stretch the seemingly limited card effects to their maximum. You can obtain new cards, but if you already have 3, you must swap out by rotating one of them back into your deck for later retrieval. Your deck, or more like a card vault in this instance, can only be accessed during a certain phase of the gameplay. This further incentivizes you to find uses for your current hand, because it may be inconvenient to wait for the next available vault accessing phase. Any new cards you obtain also cost universal tokens acquired during the game to ensure you're judicious in managing your resources and to give you further options. If you replace the word card with costume, you've basically got the idea with Balan Wonderworld's costume economy. I've never seen anything similar in a 3D platformer, and I personally believe the flow of gameplay is massively benefited by its inclusion. Each decision, while seemingly baffling in a vacuum, works toward a greater whole if the exploration of the mechanics and world is the player's primary goal. The way the costumes interact and the reasons to favor one over another are also very similar to certain battle-based card games. You see, a common criticism of the game is that the costumes are too similar, or sometimes they even outclass one another. But let's consider a card game example again. Let's say you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And you've got a monster card. It has an effect you really like, and it also has the secondary ability to deflect a certain monster attribute's attacks. But you also have a card that performs an even better version of the previous monster's effect, with the caveat that it can no longer deflect blows. Does the second monster erase the utilities of the former? No, of course not. Both have their uses and could come in handy at different times. It's no different with Balan Wonderworld. Most costumes that are criticized for similarities to others actually do have a pretty good reason to exist. Other examples include the Jumping Jack costume, which can hover really far. Shortly after obtaining it, you acquire the Pounding Pig costume, which can hover a little less far and also ground pound. Not only does the Pounding Pig not make the Jumping Jack useless, but the Jumping Jack has far more general utility in solving puzzles and overcoming obstacles than the pig. There is genuine thought put into the balancing, and it's dishonest to pretend the similarities between costumes always nullify their purposes. Even in the situations where one costume completely outclasses another, the inferior suit still handles noticeably differently and is often useful as a backup option. The punishment for getting damaged in this game, by the way, is losing the costume you're currently wearing. You might have another one of the same type in the wardrobe, or you might not. You may even have to settle for a costume with a lesser but similar effect. It's a dangerous risk that makes choosing the right dress for the circumstance all the more important. In a game where costumes, and the powers that come with them, are a limited resource, losing costumes hurts, and it should. It should be scary to take damage or fall. It adds so much more tension to decisions and hones a player's behavior to encourage careful and strategic play. You naturally learn more about what enemies are capable of, what jumps you can or can't make, and when too much risk is too much, because the penalty is so massive. If the game went with a more traditional health system that restarted the level when you failed, that would only be a slap on the wrist compared to losing one of your precious tools. What I'm saying, basically, is that I think the costume management in itself is engaging and fun. Which costume should I front with as my default? The one I front with is most likely to be damaged or lost in a fall, so it needs to be the one I'm okay with losing. Which costume should I bring with me to that upper platform? I need a certain combination to obtain the statue up there, so I have to think hard before I go. Can the bubble leaf costume travel the distance I need, or should I fall back on the jumping jack? I could take both, but that would only leave me with one more slot. Which one of my 3 costumes should I send to the wardrobe to make room for this new one? It might be quite a while to the nearest wardrobe checkpoint after all. I think puzzling stuff out like that is fun. There's additional thought, strategy, and nuance here that would be completely lost if the costumes weren't a limited resource. The entire costume system is, itself, a puzzle, in addition to the puzzles it enables in the world proper. Careful management of limited resources is considered of value as a core mechanic in many tabletop games, many strategy games, and many life simulators, to name a few genres. Why would it be disallowed for a 3D platformer to try its hand? There are 2 primary factors that make Balan Wonderworld special. The first, as previously discussed, is the costume system. The second is the level design and collectible placement. At first, levels seem pretty standard. You obtain a new costume, and then the world ahead is littered with potential uses for it. But after that, the obvious uses seemingly stop. Is that because the costume is now useless? A one-off gimmick? Usually the answer is no, of course not. That just means it's your turn to find its uses. Looking around the environment and seeing platforms you can't reach, areas that seem impossible to traverse, and then conquering them anyway with your clever costume usage is probably the defining trait of Balan Wonderworld's platforming. You'll find consistently that jump height and distance are the greatest barriers to your goals, but if you're truly determined, you can find workarounds and alternate pathways. Some might call these workarounds unintentional, and to that I say, nonsense. For you see, one of the most beautiful things about Balan Wonderworld's level design is exactly where it hides its collectibles. Balan statues, the game's primary collectible, are not hidden like stars or thunder eggs or golden cubes or jiggies. They're instead scattered about in the least likely, most unorthodox places. Paths hidden just from sight, paths sometimes right in plain sight, platforming sections hidden underneath others, and oftentimes in places that seem outright impossible to reach. There were at least a few situations where I exclaimed with joy because I thought I was breaking the game by hopping around the outskirts of the world, only to see a collectible waiting for me because of my ingenuity. At least once I actually shouted, "Oh wow," in disbelief at where they'd hidden a Balan statue. This is the first game in a long time to require I push my pathfinding skills to their maximum potential, and I'd kill for more 3D platformers to encourage such creativity. One of the most common complaints about the Balan statues and their placement is that you have access to too few on your first go, and that the game requires too much backtracking. Again, nonsense. I found consistently that I could obtain a minimum of 4 Balan statues my first time through each level, and oftentimes I could even find 5 or 6. It's about how willing you are to explore. If I failed to be convincing, I'll leave you with one final thought before I move on. All conceivable challenge comes from limitation. I don't love limitations because I want to be suppressed, it's rather the exact opposite. I adore limitations because I love to rally against authority. Without limitation, there's nothing to shatter, no strife. Because of the intentional limitations of the costume system, finding your way around actually feels freer than it ever could otherwise. Earned freedom is so much more profound than freedom handed to you. Balan Wonderworld provides limitations and lets you shatter them. Limitations are not an excuse to give up, they're a reason to try harder. Alright, so a level is well and good in itself, but what about the climax, the big finale, what caps off these spectacular exploration-focused environments? The boss fights in Balan Wonderworld are quite lovely both in concept and in execution. 3D platformers are usually about exploration and collecting, but making a boss fight that revolves around exploration is so difficult that it's usually not even attempted. Balan Wonderworld fixes this by hiding 3 collectibles in the boss pattern itself. The way you fight the boss determines how many Balan statues you receive at the end. I think that's kind of a stroke of genius. Sure, you could hammer away at the same weak point 3 times to take a boss down easily, but then you'd only get 1 statue. To get all 3, you need to find 3 unique ways to combat it, often by carefully examining its attacks and turning said attacks back against it. Sadly, while many of the boss patterns are creative and fun to puzzle out, the game falls back on a seemingly self-invented trope a few too many times. What I mean to say is, if a boss is shooting a projectile, odds are you can hit it back to damage them by jumping into it. I lost track of the number of times I just flung myself into a missile to send it right back to its source. But if you can overlook that relatively minor crutch, the boss design is largely innovative, engaging, and manages to feel like part of a whole thanks to its unorthodox design. Alright, now that all the high is out of the way, it's time to talk about the thorn in Balan Wonderworld's level and collectible design. So, Balan's Bout is a minigame triggered when you collect one of Balan's golden hats in a level. In the minigame, you're given a series of QuickTime events to complete. You're ranked on your performance, and scoring an excellent rating on every QTE gets you a Balan statue. I find the Balan's Bout minigame enjoyable, but it's also difficult to justify its presence, since it's completely divorced from the rest of the design. Nobody should have to complete an unrelated minigame to get a main collectible in a solely exploration-focused game. Regrettably, being divorced from the primary game design isn't the only problem with Balan's Bout. You see, if you fail to get an excellent rating, you can't simply try again. The golden hat disappears after the minigame's completion. You might think it's as simple as restarting the level to make it respawn, but that won't do the trick either. As strange as it seems, you have to beat the current world's boss before you can try the bout again. This punishment isn't communicated, and isn't even linked to Balan's Bout itself in any logical fashion. Not only would the game be better without Balan's Bout, but the way it's implemented is detrimental to the enjoyment of the overall experience. It's unfortunately a stain on otherwise wonderfully nuanced mechanics. Overall, Balan Wonderworld's negative reception is no surprise to the cynic in me. I believe that most people are fickle and averse to new experiences. They want games to take them on a ride, and they want that ride to present obstacles that they're familiar with and understand easily. If a game instead tries to present a new kind of obstacle or new kind of experience, it had better water itself down a bit first for their sake. You have to sell an idea to someone if you want them to engage with it. That said, Balan Wonderworld's negative reception is also no surprise to the optimist in me. I want to believe a large number of people did understand what Balan Wonderworld tried to do. I want to think they understood the design, the nuances to the costumes and their economy, but still decided the game wasn't fun. There's nothing wrong with that, but the design worked on me. I think the strange design decisions do make it fun, and that the game would be less special without them. One could still argue that, at the end of the day, Balan Wonderworld's goal was to appeal to almost everyone, and it ultimately wound up appealing to such a small niche that its detractors were very vocal and overcoming in voicing their distaste. By that metric, it failed because it didn't manage to reach its audience properly. If there's an optimal outcome to this video, it's to convince folks to look at Balan Wonderworld in a new light, and maybe spark some enjoyment where there wasn't before. Even if that goal turns out to be unreachable, I can rest easy knowing that I won the most important battle. The game got made, and nobody's going to go back and alter its design. Its beautiful brilliance is mine to experience and re-experience as much as I like.